Hey everybody, I hope you had a fantastic Mother's Day. This weekend tends to be one of the busiest weekends of the year for a lot of garden centers all around the country. So if you visited a garden center this weekend, it was probably pretty parked up and busy. Hopefully you went home with some great plants, including fantastic hanging baskets. Hopefully you got some with the appropriate number of plants in the right size pot. This one's a 14-inch pot. It only has 3 Supertunia vistas in it. So I've talked about this before. It can make a big difference in how easy it is to care for. I don't know for sure what you ended up with, so I want to go through kind of a survival guide of how to take care of your hanging baskets that you did get. I'm going to recap some of the things that I've covered in previous videos, just give you the highlights on kind of my best practices. And then I also have some containers that are going to need help and they're going to need some attention, and you may have ended up in this situation, so I want to cover all this stuff. So when it comes to hanging baskets, basically, it's all about making sure you give them the right amount of light. So usually the tags are going to say if it's full sun, it really does need about 6 hours or more of daylight every single day. They don't have to be continuous, but it needs those 6 or more hours. If it says shade anywhere, whether it says full shade or part shade, that usually means it can't take the afternoon sun. So keep it out of the afternoon sun. Usually means it needs, I'm going to say 3 to 5 hours worth of sunlight. Kind of varies depending on the plant that it is, but that's a good way to go. There aren't a lot of full shade. A lot of times your begonia and your fuchsia can handle a really low amount of light, so can ferns. But beyond that, you want to make sure they're getting a little bit of sunlight. That's just my suggestion there. And then you are going to want to fertilize very regularly. So what we tend to do is we get just some of the little time release pellets and we'll put those in. We'll follow the instructions on how many to put in. You add those in and we put them in. Usually we do it, they say they last for 3 months, but once the temperatures get above 70 degrees, they degrade a little faster. So you might want to put them in, maybe once a month, maybe a little bit. You can extend it a little bit longer than that. So follow the instructions, put those in just at the base of the plant in the soil. So every time it gets watered, it gets a little bit of fertilizer. And then once a week, we use a water-soluble fertilizer. Most popular one is the Miracle-Gro one. We tend to go with the Bloom Booster one because it's good for your, most of your plants. Petunias don't actually need that Bloom Booster in there, but if you're using it for your other plants, don't worry about it. You can go ahead and use it with your petunias and all your other plants. It's a good way to go. If you're not sure, like I mentioned before, sometimes we don't fertilize our begonias as much, our impatiens quite as much. A lot of times with the succulents or the kind of plush leaf ones, the leaves kind of start turning a little bit red or they kind of change color a little. That's sometimes a signal that they have kind of too much fertilizer. And if you really need to know, go ahead and ask at your local garden center. They may have an idea. Only thing is that there's so many factors that could be affecting your specific location. Could be your water, could be your soil, could be your location, so they might not have all the answers, but they might be able to help. And then also consistent water is key. So petunias, they don't like to be dry and then really wet. They don't like the two extremes. They like to be more in the middle. They can handle either for short periods of time, but I'd recommend trying to keep them as consistently watered as possible. And if you have plants that are more shade, like your begonias, maybe your impatiens, be careful about watering those. You may need to water them a lot less than your other plants that take full sun. So make sure you're checking the moisture. Either have a moisture meter, put your finger in there, get used to lifting the pots and seeing if they need water or not by the weight of the plant. That'll make a big difference. If you're watering these a lot, like let's say you have to water them more than once a day, you probably should fertilize more often. Now, once a week is going to be fine for the most part, but there might be a point, when we get to the end of July or August, where you're going to say, I'm going to add a little more. I'm going to do 2 doses this week. That'll be fine, especially if the plant isn't flowering as much at that time. That little bit of extra fertilizer might make all the difference. So now I want to tackle some of the issues that might show up. So I did go to some of the box stores yesterday and checked at what they kind of were carrying. And I have to say, some of their plants were pretty sad. Part of it, I think, up here, the shipments probably came in earlier in the week. They've been sitting on a rack all week. They had not been properly watered. I could tell that at some of the places. And then we did have some cold spells, got down into the 30s, which wouldn't normally affect, say, petunias and calibrachoas and verbena that much. But I think it just was stressing them out without the water. These are the 2 best baskets I could find. So you may have found really beautiful ones near you, but there's 2 things I want to do here. So this one here it's a 10-inch basket, and it has 5 Supertunia Mini Vista petunias in here. This is insane. I mean, a 10-inch with 5 Supertunias, much less Supertunia vistas, is crazy. This is not going to look good down the road. You're not going to be able to keep it watered. It's just going to start looking bad. It's going to go downhill pretty quick. And although this is a self-watering pot, which means there's probably some kind of reservoir in here, but in a small pot like this, that also means that that reservoir is taking away soil space, so there's less root space as well. So I don't know that the reservoir is going to help when you have this many vigorous plants packed into one container. This one here are some wave petunias. There's 4 in here. This is a 10-inch. This is still more than I would recommend putting in a container for waves. It's just, they're vigorous varieties. You don't need to put 4 in a 10-inch. So this one I'm going to divide, and I've had a lot of people ask me, hey, can I cut these up? And the answer is maybe. It's going to depend on the container. So I think what I'll do is I'll start with the cut up one, because a lot of people were asking about that one. And this one I'm going to pot up into a bigger size and show you how I do that. So let's start with these here. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the handles off, because they're just going to get in my way. And whether or not you can cut these into, like take one container and divide it up into 2 or 3 or 4 is going to depend on partly the plants that are in there and also how long they've been in there, because the more established they are, it can be a little bit more dangerous. That said, if let's say you're watching this in the future and you didn't know this and you're kind of like, oh, if I would have known, I would have done it sooner. If it's looking rough and it's probably not going to make it, it's not going to hurt to try this. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to take a look. So first of all, I can tell the way these were grown, they were never cleaned underneath. There's a lot of dead stuff under here. That's common just because when they're mass grown like this, there's no one going through and cleaning them up. So I'm going to take some of these moldy leaves off the bottom. You don't see them from the outside. It is not hurting the plant, although eventually it can kind of start looking a little bit rough. So we'll want to get that taken care of. I guess maybe what I'll do is first I'll get it out of the pot, and we're going to take a look at the roots here. So I don't want to break too many branches. Oops, sorry. Okay, so there's not tons of roots. I mean, the roots go to the edge, but this has not been in this pot a super long time. So I'm definitely not worried about cutting these up. And so that's a good thing, I think, for the situation that I'm in. I can get these in. If the roots are really intertwined, then you are going to be cutting through them, and it can be a little bit challenging, but I can tell that this is actually, these are quite young plants overall, but that's not too much of a problem. Now, if you feel really adventurous, you could use a Sawzall. I would try to get the longer end, the more serrated would be good. That can be kind of a fun way to do it, but it can also be a little, you can be a little bit of a hack on it. So a bread knife works. I'm just using this kind of tool. This is what we have around. And I'm going to cut this one just in half. So let's just see. So we'll take out anything that's broken off. And I can see right where the plants kind of end here. So this is a very soft, oh my goodness. Wow. But not much holding this thing together. And you can see the roots aren't even holding on to this soil that they have. So, yeah, I mean, it's fine. It's not, not a big deal, but it is kind of, I've gotten used to having kind of nicely grown petunias and stuff. There's nothing wrong with these, but they're not in great shape. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to just put 2 in this 14-inch. So I'm potting them up. I'm going from, that was probably a 9 or 10-inch, and I'm going to put them into this 14-inch. Because there's not a lot of root development, I'm not going to expect tons of growth right away. And I'm going to just tuck these in. Now, I don't have enough soil in here. I have a little bit more, but I want to save it for the end. But I'm going to fill this up with soil. Yes, it looks long and narrow, but it's better to keep these petunias more in the center anyway, because they're going to drape out, and that's also going to encourage them to just kind of fill in. In a couple of weeks, once these start growing, they're going to be just fine. It wouldn't hurt to give them a little haircut, although these are pretty dense. Like they're not leggy or anything, and there's a lot of branching going on. So I might not trim them, but you can trim them back. I mean, if you did go through, you could just kind of nip the ends, or if it's really crazy, you just kind of pull it in. I've done it to where you're going back down to where there's only like 2.5, 3 inches of plant left. You can go pretty aggressive on these. Since they don't have a lot of roots right now, I'm not going to mess with them. If I need to trim them, I'll trim them later. I want them to put their energy into producing these roots right now because it definitely needs them. Oh, they're kind of slimy underneath. So not a great basket now that I've taken it apart and really looked at it, but it looked good in that little pot. And that's one thing that is really common, is for pots for Mother's Day especially to be just loaded with plants. I was even at a regular nursery, and in order to compete with what a lot of times the big box stores have, some nurseries are doing it where they're packing those containers full of plants. I saw one, I think it was like a 12-inch, and it had like 7 or 9 plants in it, and they were vigorous varieties, and I just thought, oh, that's going to be tough. Now, one thing you should also know is that a lot of growers are using what are called multi-stick plugs. So they will kind of propagate like 3 different plants in one plug. It's a little bit more efficient way. It saves them space. It also can save them time down the road. If you have those kind, what you'll find is that all the plants are growing together in this one little spot. So 3 plants come out of there. They might have 2, 3, or 4 in there. If you divide them, don't try to divide up that little plug area, that, you know, so just keep those stems together. You'll still get the 3 plants together, you know, all in one grouping, but you don't want to try to tease those out, because even at this stage, if they were developed this far, I think it's a little dangerous to try to break those apart. But you'll be able to see where the obvious kind of plantings are, and you'll cut, you know, along those lines. And I could easily cut this one into 4 plants if I wanted to. A wave would fill this basket, but I would like it to fill up a little bit sooner, because that's the other thing, is the fewer plants you put in, the more patient you have to be. So anyway, I'm blathering on. So I'm going to add more soil to this after. Let's see this one here. And I don't let my little leaves that I trim, I don't let them fall into here. I've heard people say like, oh, it just becomes compost. And it's like, yeah, compost though needs time to decompose. And I don't want that happening in with my plants right now. Let's, you know, put them on the compost pile so they can properly decompose. You don't want to have that hot stuff in there anyway. So this is kind of the same story. There's some slimy ones in here, and I'm going to try to get those off, because if you keep the slimy leaves on there, they could just cause more sliminess, and we don't want to do that. I see there is some fertilizer in here, but it's all spent. So when I take these little pods and I squeeze them, they snap. And if that's the case, they're pretty much done. So the fertilizer that's in here is pretty much spent. So we're going to add some time release granules in here, and then we will start fertilizing them every single week. So I will post some updates on these. I've got lots of containers that I need to show you guys how they've changed over time. Now, the other one I want to show you, this is the best basket I could find. It's pretty good. I mean, it's fine. But all the other ones there were absolutely hideous. Like, it was pretty disgusting at what I saw, because they were just like, half of them were dying, half of them were in bad shape. It was really unfortunate. But what's even more unfortunate about this container, and I don't even know what to say, 5 Supertunia Mini Vistas in a 10-inch container. This is so insane. I mean, it's so nice and full, and I bet it looked really good when it first came off the truck, and then they just didn't take care of it this week, and it got a little rough. And this was the best one I could find. Everything was still on carts. I went and dug through the carts to find one pretty good looking one. You can see where it was pushed up against other plants, and these would kind of spread out over time, but there is no way you can keep this alive for very long in this 10-inch. It probably won't even, I'm guessing 4th of July, you won't have this unless you do what I'm going to do, which is pot it up into a bigger container. So I'm going to put it into this one. I'm trying to think. I think this was a 18-inch or something like that. And this is a self-watering container. Haven't ever used this one before. So if you're going to use it as self-watering, you use this little tray here that goes in, and they actually are very good about saying, place notch here. And then when I look here, it says right on the container, and this is where the notch is, and then I just slide it in, put it on the notch, so then it just kind of clicks into place. It doesn't, I mean, it's not an actual click, but that's where you want it. And then what happens is that bottom reservoir fills with water, and if you overfill it with water, it does overflow out. It has these little prongs that stick up, and if you go past those prongs, it'll drain out that way. If you decide you're not using the self-watering feature, I would drill a hole in the bottom, 1, 2, or 3 holes in there. That would be what I would definitely do, because you want to have that drainage. And with the holes at the top of these, prongs here, you could have the entire bottom sitting in water, and that bathtub is not going to be good for these plants. So that's my suggestion there. So I have one filled with soil, or almost filled with soil. Let me show you how I do this, because I find this to be a pretty easy way. So I have some soil in here. I didn't fill that much. I kind of left it pretty open. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my hand in here, just go towards the middle, and then go like this. Okay, so this has a very similar feature as this big one, but I still don't think it's going to be that good. Now this one has a little bit better roots. I can see more of the roots in here, so I'm happy to see that. I think that's going to benefit. Oh, you know what I usually do? I usually put this in, then I pack it around. Should I do that? I should have showed you that, but I think I got nervous because there's so many, it's so wide. So what I'm going to do, put this in here. Oh, I don't think I'm high enough, so I'm going to have to add some soil. So let's pop this out real quick. And I'm just going to put the soil towards the bottom here, because I want that there. Now, if there are any branches that break off, or if I need to give this a little bit of trim, that's not a problem. I'm kind of tempted to trim it anyway. And still, I feel like when I'm looking at, I have about 3 inches of space all the way around it, which does give it a lot more room, and that should be fine for this one, especially with that water reservoir in there. So these should look pretty good and they should hold up well, but I could try to divide these, but these are super petunias. Those are rather expensive plants in general. So I kind of feel like, let's not disturb these. Let's just work with them. And it's a nice color combination as well. They're just going to be really quite bright. They look a little dingy right now, I think, because they're a little stressed out. But I do know that this Mini Vista Scarlet has a much brighter color. The Mini Vista Yellow does tend to have a little bit more of a green tinge to it compared to some of the other yellow petunias out there. It's better than the old-fashioned yellows, like the limoncello and those kind, but it does still have that green tinge to it. So I'm just going through and I'm making sure I've got soil all the way around and keeping it pretty even. I did pre-moisten my soil here just because I knew trying to figure out watering when I'm dealing with these kind of already planted up ones. I didn't want to try to figure out like, oh, do I have enough water in there? Do I not? So my soil's right where I want it to be. And this, I'll check it. It's probably going to be fine today and tomorrow, but I will check it again. If it gets really hot and dry, then I would get back to it. So in the end, this works out. So I do want to also show you this one here. Like a lot of plastic containers come with these, just these little hooky things that you can easily pop on. They're also very easy to pop off. If there's wire hangers, which tend to be a little stronger, then it's a little bit different story. So what I like to do on these is I will go through, let's find one. Here's one of them. So you're going to want to go in and pop it through, and I haven't found it matters which, as long as you get one on each part. But I've got this in there now and I hooked it in. You could, in theory, just leave it like this, but I tend to like to grab my little pliers, which are right here, and pinch them. And that's really important because what can happen is, let's say you have it hanging on the porch and you go up and you go to lift it to see if it needs water or something like that. And then all of a sudden, this could unhook, and you really don't want that happening because that can cause it to drop and fall. So I just pinch them. You can tell I haven't done this in a while, and of course I can't see it. Come on. So I didn't do a great job on that pinch. So let me get the other ones in first and we'll go. So what I tend to do is I go one side and then I go to the other. You don't have to do it this way, but I do find that it can be a little helpful. Let's see, because then I'm pretty balanced usually. So this one is a little easier for me to get at, and I'll do it from my angle because from when I'm trying to show you, I'm a little at a angle that's hard to see. So I'm pulling this over, and you can give it a little twist as well. I mean, anything's better than nothing here, but there we go. So that's a bit of an improvement. I'm still going to probably fuss with it a little bit more to make sure it's more the way I want it. I'm getting better with each one that I've hooked, so I will go back in. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so I ended up with, I bought two, and this was very expensive for a 10-inch. It ended up being like $34. The other one was $20. So there are no deals on hanging baskets right now, which is the case. We won't be seeing those deals until either A, they start looking really, really bad, which isn't a bad time to shop, because if you still have leaves on, like petunias, verbena, calibrachoa, they usually will recover. You just got to be a little patient, give them their fertilizer. But again, I could go in and give this a really good haircut, but I mean, it seems like it was pretty well grown as far as it's really well branched. Each plant has lots of branches on it. So we'll see what it looks like in a week or two, and then I'll decide, because this is one that's going to grow out and then down. It'll cover the pot. So I don't feel like I need to cut this one back. A lot of times I do, but this time I don't. So there you have it, everybody. Thank you guys for watching. I hope this helps you keep those hanging baskets looking fantastic from Mother's Day and beyond, right through the end of the season. A good basket should last you until frost, at least in our area. I know when you get down south, it can get really hot and impossible to keep things watered, or some plants struggle in humidity and that type of thing. But up here, we should be able to keep them going, but we probably need to make sure that they're in a big enough pot. So thank you guys for watching. Happy Mother's Day to all you moms out there, and all those people who have been mothers to people who maybe aren't their biological mother. That's very much appreciated as well. So you guys have a very, very good week, and I'll talk to you all very, very soon.